Alright guys, we're about ready to start. Some people are still filtering in, but we won't miss too much. I want to welcome you guys to the Game Makers, Vermont Game Makers Meetup panel. Thank you guys all for coming out today. Woo! Yeah! Some sweet woos, alright. My name is Robert. I'll be moderating along with the lovely and talented Shane over here. And you guys just kind of share mics, feel free to pull them over, because everybody's going to want to hear what you guys have to say. This is a very exciting panel. We are here with Vermont Game Makers. These guys are all local Vermont gamers and developers. And if you want to go down the row and introduce yourself to everybody.
Sure. Hi everybody, my name is Sam Kurnit. I contribute to gaming. I'm a voice actor.
I'm Nate Walpole, currently a professor at Champlain College. Been making games for the past 15 years. Spent 10 years making Halo. Cool.
Ooh.
Hi, my name is Shane Sealis. I was studying evolution robotics and had a couple of games that I felt like I really needed to get out of my system, so I jumped into game development. And Jeff and I have been co-running a Vermont game developers meetup.
Hi, I'm Jeff Sprenger, and I run a local game studio called Zemery, and we develop a game called Neurobotic. There it is. And Neurobotic is a game where kids in middle school and high school they evolve control of robots from basic things like standing and walking to jumping, and then they compete the robots against each other. And it's a little bit different because we're funded by the National Science Foundation to produce these education games for kids, but use gaming to keep them engaged. So a little different than what most people do.
So there's a little intro, and we're going to take questions from you guys here in a little bit, but I just want to give you guys a little familiarity. So let's start out with something simple. If you want to go down and kind of what brought you guys into gaming? What was some of your first experiences with gaming, whether as a developer or as a player?
I've been playing games for, oh god, do I really have to betray that? A really long time. I mean, I remember when my best friend got an SNES way back in the day. You guys know what year that probably was. And I've just been fascinated with it ever since. It gives you, much in the same way that I love acting and voice acting, it gives you an avenue to do things that you can't do in real life necessarily. There's, no chance that I'm ever going to actually be Iron Man. I don't really think science is going to advance that quickly by the time that, I'm still alive. But I can do that in a video game, and it's incredibly cathartic and adventurous and just a ton of fun. So it's something I've stuck with for a very long time, and voice acting is, for me, it's another way to feed into that. It's something that I really love to do. It's the way I can contribute, because coding is not something I understand, but I can still do my part to make games happen.
I originally got into games. I was a classical animation student up in Canada. Any Canadians in the house here? Good, good.
Woo, Canada!
All right. Now I'm American. But I started out doing 2D animation, Disney style, Beauty and the Beast, love that stuff. And then I saw a real opening for storytelling in interactive entertainment. Earthworm Jim was kind of the game that kind of opened it up for me, where there's tons of good animation, good characterization, and I could apply those talents to a digital medium, and started making out and making games and started making Halo, and it was fun. So I kept doing it, and now I'm doing indie stuff, keeping my skills raw by doing kind of everything under the sun. Started as an animator, and now I can kind of do it all. So you end up growing with the medium as well.
Choose wisely.
So for me, it was definitely started out as a player. I can remember the first time a friend of mine got a Nintendo Entertainment System, and he had Super Mario, and I mean, this was the point where, when you had the controller in your hand and you wanted to jump, you would jump like this. Every button press was mimicked, physically. And there was just something about it that to me was so captivating, about getting to take control of some agent in some other like little world. And I mean, that really is what drove my interest in becoming interested in computer programming. Like I was like, somehow all this all this code somehow relates to video games, and that actually kind of kept me going for a long time. And one of the other things that I think has been that I come to later to really respect is that, I mean, game development subsumes all these other like really deep and rich disciplines. Like it's not just computer programming. I mean, there's so many other roles that are each of them like very difficult and to master. And so like as an independent developer, you kind of have to wear all these different hats and do some things like not that great, but which is another reason why I think it's really nice to have a community of people who you can actually go to and say like who have different skills than you have. So.
Well, I got into the first game I ever played. I'm really embarrassed to say this, but it was Pong at home, and we had one of these color TVs, and I know I'm dating myself, but we played Pong so often, or for so long, that we burnt the Pong image into the color TV, much to my parents' dismay. And then, so fast forward about 10 years, and I was living in Dallas, working as a software developer, and I got very addicted to Wolfenstein and Doom. And the guys who started it were like running around Dallas in their Lamborghinis or Ferraris. But recently I got into gaming because part of what I'm trying to do is teach kids about science, math, and physics through robotics. And I really realized that, yeah, we can do a robot simulator, and kids play that for a while, but they don't engage because they don't really identify with anything in the game. Now, some great simulator software out there for things like Euro Truck, Train Simulator, and so on, and they have their place, but we're really looking at combining sort of gaming and education together, and really taking inspiration from like what's going on here, where people are so involved with their characters that they really carry, that if you call it the franchise or the brand, they carry that forward. They're the ones who really own it in the end. And if we can achieve that with education, then we think kids will be far more engaged.
I think that's pretty solid right there. And so now you have a background of like how these guys got into gaming. Obviously, you guys have all your story about into gaming. I played Atari when I was a kid too. That's a little dating myself, but I think it's. I always say that if you have a kid, you just got to start them off with an Atari. Like they don't get an Xbox, they get an Atari. They have to work their way up to Nintendo, then the Sega, and the TurboGrafx. They got to work their way up, beat these games, and then you get the next one, until you get an Xbox 360. But like, so we're going to talk about like gaming and like the confluence of gaming and cultures, and that's something I want to hit on really early too. Is how gaming has been this sort of like it's encompassing everything now. Because now you have like ties in with comic books and tie-ins with games and things like that. And I remember back in the day when it was like the Superman game for this Nintendo 64, which was terrible, had nothing to do with some of you guys know what I'm talking about. Had nothing to do with the content, was just flying through rings, And like when we talk about how far we've come as far as like gaming is now we have stuff like Batman Arkham Asylum, and we have these amazing games based on properties that are really like fantastic, And now as a creator of content, you can also look at gaming and say, hey, if I'm doing a comic book, what's the game going to be like? And like if I'm doing a movie, hey, could this be a game? If I'm writing a novel, could this be a game, And like as game developers and as designers yourself, like how have things changed now as far as like, let's say, adapting like, comics or adapting other media sources into your games? If anybody has any points on that.
Yeah, I'm good. So, there's obviously a lot of work where comics are kind of flowing into movie franchises. Marvel is spending a great deal of time creating these fantastic movies, but many of the games also create their own characters, as you can see here. My son plays TF2. He's 13 years old. And he just begged me to come today, but he has other stuff he has to go to, and he's like, his name is Medic. He's like, don't call me Ben, call me Medic. What the hell are you talking about? And so, you know, what I think is really important about that is that, you know, how do you create these characters within a game? How do you create that personalization so that kids engage? You know, we're in robots, and I thought, okay, well, you know, what examples do I have? Well, there was the movie Robots, but, you know, Robin Williams is such a strong character, it's kind of hard to identify with that robot character. But then there's the movie WALL-E, right? And there's such a cute robot, it's like a puppy dog. And there's Eva, which is like kick-ass ninja white robot. And I thought, okay, but they're not people. Everybody wants to identify with people. So I went online and I looked for WALL-E costumes, and I saw thousands of kids dressed as WALL-E for Halloween, and their buddy was Eva, and they're all going out holding hands. And I thought, you know, look what they've done with this movie, and now they've created there's persona, even though it's a robot. So it's something for us to aspire to.
I guess it's funny because for me, like a lot of licensed games were so bad when they started like actually having a license. You know, for some properties, some movies, something was actually a mark against a game. I remember
E.T.
Like, yeah, right. So it's really. And there was all sorts of reasons for that. One is oftentimes, you know, they would have, you know, very kind of crazy deadlines to they wanted to like make a new game, you know, kind of after they already finished the movie, and they wanted to be like released like when the movie was released, which is just
usually an 8-month cycle. It was awful. I've worked on a few of those properties, and it's grueling.
Yeah. So and it seems like now games have been given more weight such that they actually begin them, you know, while the movies are happening, or with established properties, like you can have, you know, more time to do that. So it's been great seeing that licensed properties have actually become a lot better.
So back at Bungie, we've always had a really good conduit to our fan base. Our fans writing a lot of fan fiction, taking into account our very rich and deep and heavy story Bible that was very, very thick. Much like Star Wars, Halo kind of evolved into this big sort of universe that had many different pockets of story that we could pull from for games, for comic books, for toy lines, for all kinds of different ways of digesting that IP. So it's very easy once you have a good established universe to branch that out into other mediums.
So Nick, while you're on the subject, I want to ask you a little bit about how you felt about like how a lot of these games, like Halo, for instance, people cosplay as Halo characters. People cosplay as Master Chief all the time, and that's been a new thing. You know, like in the old days, you wouldn't really see people cosplaying as actually as game people, but you see Mario's, you see Halo, you see all these characters. And also, maybe I ask you about like Red vs. Blue and some of the stuff that came out of Halo, because that was a thing. It was a game first, and then all of a sudden people were making these hilarious content and these videos and all these things like with the engine, you know. Like, so how did you guys feel at Bungie when you saw like the first Red vs. Blue and like, what is this guy doing?
We actually we embraced it a lot. We at Bungie we have a culture of always supporting our fan base, which is good. Every studio should have that culture because they are they're your bread and butter. But with working with Red vs. Blue, when it first came out, we were shocked that they could actually do it with our engine, because our engine was very, very broken under the hood. They were using crouch animations to perform extreme acts. We ended up working with them, actually. There was one bug that allowed them to put the weapons down and have the heads actually look up. So the way it worked is they wanted to have two characters talking to each other, but not have the weapon always up. So they actually found that there was this bug that when they put the image screen all the way down, the head would rise up a little bit. So they'd sit there and talk like this for their machinima while they're recording these stories. That bug got fixed in the midst of the development of Halo 2. So it was actually on me to put in some special aim screens, actually having an aim down function, so that they could lower the weapon and actually perform their machinima that had a large fan base and and got us lots of love for Halo. So we ended up supporting them after they were supporting us. So it was this, I hate using the word synergy, but it's what it was.
I think that's important. If you guys out there who want to get into game design or want to make games, it's important to realize that your fans can be a great source of content for you. Like, your fans can help generate ideas. I want to talk about that a little bit more too. As designers, how do you decide, like, with, you know, because you have a lot of fans for your games, obviously, people, communities develop. How do you, like, filter out the good ideas from the bad? You know, like, do you listen to people, like, on forums and things like that? Do you try and take ideas, or do you just kind of, you're in a walled room, you're like, nope, this is everything just inside is what we're going to do?
I'll speak to that really quickly. It turns out that, you know, a good portion of our design team, both at Bungie and 343, were former fans that proved their worth with some of their work that they did within the community and came on board as community managers, and then they learned a lot of aspects of game design and are now, you know, multiplayer designers and people within the team. So we don't, I personally don't, and I know Bungie doesn't discount fan ideas. They support them to a point, unless it's another legal kind of thing. But for the most part, you listen to them, you try to support what they're doing, and see if you can fold in any ideas that might be worthwhile.
There was a bit of advice that I heard from a writer that I like, that kind of helps me stay open to criticism and feedback, and that is, when the person says there's something wrong with your game, they're almost always right. And when they tell you how to fix it, they're almost always wrong.
That's great. I think we probably do things a little differently than a typical game studio. We go out into schools and we have kids playing our game. They play both Neurobotic, and we have Cubotic here, which is our robot arm. So we're watching kids play. One of the things we did this summer is we went to Rosie's Girls, and we had 50 girls between the ages of about 12 and 16 play the game. And in any group of people playing the game for the first time, we can very quickly identify those that are disinterested, those that are engaged but are going to follow the game and follow the instruction, and then a small few that want to take total control. And they're usually the ones, they push up faster than anybody else. They typically have ideas in the form of, oh, this sucks, you shouldn't do this, you know, you should do this instead. And for us, these are the people that we really want to listen to, because we think they'll push the game a lot further than we can as a small group. And as that grows, our challenge is that how do we identify those people early on, that people that are really passionate, and bring them into the conversation and treat them gently, so that we're not discounting their ideas, but we can also implement everything that they want.
To piggyback a little bit on what Nate was saying earlier, you know, as a voice actor, I don't work with a specific studio. I work with, you know, whoever hires me for the game. So I see this sort of from the other side of the lens. I work with a lot of different people, and what I notice amongst pretty much all of these developers, no one works in game development that doesn't like games. Nobody does it because it's just the job. They were the people that hiring. These are all people who are very passionate about what they're doing. They're fans themselves, so they understand when fans are unhappy about how something is working in a game and they have suggestion, how important that is, because they've probably been there themselves. I can't think of anybody that doesn't take fan feedback seriously, no matter how ridiculous it may seem, because like you said, they're bread and butter. You guys are the customers for the people who make these games. They don't get to keep making the games if you don't like them. So they want to cater to what it is that you guys all want them to do.
Yeah. To that point, though, there are a few little limitations, like bringing back the pistol in Halo 1. So, yeah, that one, we're going to let that lie.
So now I think what's fascinating too is worth talking about is how gaming, like making games, is a very storytelling aspect now too. With the technology and the tools we have, you're much more capable of telling a great story. Like you look at something like Deus Ex, or you look at like these games that like really involve you in a narrative. And there's a sandbox games too, like Minecraft is great because you're making your own narrative. In a game like Minecraft, it's like you bring your own adventure to it, like whatever you want to do. Whereas you have these games that have like these great stories. And somebody had a great quote about how gaming is unique in media, because if you're reading a book, you won't get halfway through the book and the book will just stop you from reading the rest of it unless you can answer a quiz or prove that you know it. Like a movie doesn't stop you halfway through, but a game, if you're not good at it, you don't get access to the whole game. You have to be good enough at it to pass through that level and get to the next level. So gaming is alone in media and creation as being the only media source that really you have to have a certain level of skill, you have to have a certain level of involvement with the media. And you think about it, you spend hundreds of hours with a game where you might spend like 8-10 hours with a movie if you watch it a few times, or 20 hours with an album. So as a storytelling tool, like if you guys want to talk a little bit about like how like as game makers, you can look at it as a tool where you can kind of tell stories or tell a narrative or like really create something, and whether you guys like that aspect or whether you're more in the side of having the gamer make their own narrative in a game.
This is actually really interesting and topical, because for me, I definitely see these as kind of like two opposites. You can either have a really strong narrative design where you have a game that almost becomes a movie, and there's lots of games you can kind of criticize for that, but they have a strong story to tell. And then you have other games where they essentially tell no story, and they just leave you free to tell whatever story it is that you prefer. And you can accept this as kind of being like, well, those are your choices as a game designer, to either go kind of have a strong story or to have no story and give the player total agency. If you buy into that, I would say I would probably be more on the agency, giving players agency, and leaving them free to tell their own stories. There's even there's a game called Dwarf Fortress, which is it has the worst interface you've ever used. You cannot remember what to do or how to do things, but it's so amazing in terms of the mechanics and the stories that come out of it. You don't even have to play it. Don't even play it. Just read the stories that people have written about the games that they have played and shared with one another, because they are amazing. Actually, for the talk that we have, this is a plug, it's actually on, the title of the talk is called Player Agency and Narrative Can Be Friends. We have a speaker coming, and she essentially tries to lay out like a third route. Like, how can you have both, where you have a strong narrative and the player still has agency? So that's happening this week on Thursday. So
plugs.
Speaking to that narrative question, I see both narrative and gameplay as being malleable as well as symbiotic. We, over the course of developing many of the Halo games, including a really cool unreleased one, we always saw the narrative as being very, very important, but we never sacrificed gameplay for that. We had the pockets of gameplay, and you probably heard some of our designers say 30 seconds of fun. Well, we kind of established that 30 seconds of gameplay fun and then kind of wrap story moments around that. We will change narrative if we have to accommodate gameplay and vice versa, because we see it as one complete package, whether you're in multiplayer or in a single-player campaign.
I want to talk about the importance of story as it hit me like a wall last year. My background is in scientific research and engineering, and I love robotics, I love simulation, I do it all day long. I do not need a story personally. So we bring this game out and we're testing it with kids, and one of the kids asked me, "Why am I doing this?" And I'm like, "Wait, why are you going to school, or why are you playing this game?" He said, "Well, I'm getting this robot to walk, and I'm evolving, and I'm doing this, but like, for what?" And then I realized, oh my God, he's not engaged in the game because there is no overreaching goal. There was no purpose in this. And so, we went back, and for what we are now in phase 2 of Neurobotic, is we've developed a whole story about where are these robots going and why are you training them? Where are they headed? And our story is that you're training robots to go to Mars to build the human habitats that are coming, and we have brought into our team a former NASA robotics engineer who is sort of guiding us on what can you really do with robots on another planet and what are some of the challenges to get there. And we started talking to the kids about this, and their eyes lit up. I'm like, yeah, man, I want my robot to go to Mars. This is so cool, you know. So we I don't know if we solved that problem, but at least it hit home for me how important the story was.
So, quick show of hands, how many of you guys are interested in developing your own games? That's definitely quite a few of you. That's fantastic. We're going to open up Q&A here in a moment, but before we do, I want you guys, maybe you can give some general advice to people who are looking into developing their own games. Like, for instance, there's stuff like Game Maker out there that's totally free you can check out. There's other game-making programs. Like, if you guys can give them some advice on how you think is a good way to get into the industry, whether like modding or making your own games or doing things. And also, if you want, give an example of what you think is a very well-designed game that people are familiar with, and even like the terribly designed game.
That Halo game, oh, jeez.
Every game has its faults.
Well, I just want to put a plug in. You know, we're part of the Vermont game developers, and you talk about getting into gaming. The guy with the red hat, Fisher, over there, put your hand up. He gave a great talk, I guess about 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, on using Construct 2 to develop games. So I think if you want to get into gaming, you just need to jump in. There are a lot of tools that make it very easy. You can come out to our game developer group that meets once a month and meet people who are developing games. So if you're, the thing I say to you is if you're working alone and you don't know how to get into it, find people who share your passion, and they'll help you with the areas of game design or game programming that you don't know.
So another little plug. So I'm a professor at Champlain College now, giving back. Spent 15 years in the industry. Now I'm trying to help plant seeds for new developers. So if you do have any further questions and stuff, I've actually got an artist table, E20 on the second floor there. I've got business cards there. You can stop on by, grab my contact information, and ask away. If you have any other questions aside from what you get answered here. But in terms of tools being very, very accessible for people now, you've got some really amazing free engines out there, even AAA quality engines. Myself, I'm developing in Unreal Engine 4. It is free. Unity is free. All the materials that you need are in the documentation. There's never been a time where there's been a better documented way of just going in from the ground level into games than there is now. So you're actually in a very good place. All of you young kids too, play around with that stuff, play around with those free tools. Get involved in your community, go to these different gaming events. There's summer camps all around New England for game development. So if you're finding yourself a little bit bored as a high school student in the summers, you can always hit up some of those game camps. And game jams are also a really good way of just diving in and kind of learning. Game jams are typically 24, 48 hour, 72 hour kind of events that force you to just dive right in and get something done within that short time frame. And there's no better test than jumping into the fire like that.
I just want to kind of sing the praises of all the free resources that are out there. I used to love going to the bookstore and buying technical books. It was a thing, and there's a bunch of books you can now buy for different game environments. But nowadays actually I see that as being more of a roadblock, like buying the technical book that's going to help you, because the software is going to change. Also, once you buy that technical book and you've made that financial investment, now you're like, oh, this book has to work for me. This book has to do what I want. I already paid money for this. Whereas if you're using one of the free resources and it's not doing what you want, you go back to Google. Like you just keep moving to the thing that the next thing for you to overcome, and you're not kind of like, oh, but I invested in this and I have to make this work for me. So there's so many free resources, whether you like it in video format or in a write-up. with pictures in it. I mean, there's so many different ways to get it, and I would just strongly plug the Unity environment, which I think is a fantastic environment for starting out with game development.
I'll just go ahead and say ditto to everything that they said, and just to sort of further harp on the wonders of the internet. If there's something you want to do and you don't know how, someone probably already made a YouTube tutorial for it. So the best thing to do is really start trying stuff. If you run into a roadblock, Google it. You'll probably find the answer. If not, maybe you'll find the answer on your own, and then you'll be the one who puts it up there to help somebody else out. It's a wonderful community. And finding community events helps you even further when you can get that help in person. So yeah, do all of that.
So if some of you guys have any questions, so you can start maybe coming up this way. If a few of you have some questions, I'll come get you guys. You know, if a few of you have questions, just come on over and we'll ask you. Oh, you were gonna.
Oh, I was just going to just underscore the word community. When you're developing a game, do not go at it alone. Okay, your game is only as strong as the people that support you and that are doing similar things and running into the similar problems. So use those forums and use those community conduits to sound off. You don't have to reveal your whole secret game that's amazing, but you can talk about certain little things that roadblocks and hurdles that you might be overcoming.
Also, promotion too. I know you guys want to talk about promotion. Like, if some of you guys actually, I'm sure a few of you actually have games you're already working on and getting out there. If you guys want to talk about how to promote those games in good like theaters and areas where like they can actually get some, you know, get them in front of people.
So I have no idea how you actually promote a game, but not knowing, you know, I could see a little bit of how it is that you know, promotion works conventionally. Because one of the things that's great is you have a global market, right? Like you post your stuff online, and now people can buy that anywhere, which sounds so great. And then you're like, oh, but how do I reach everyone? And it turns out it costs a lot of money to do that. So one of the things that I've been interested in trying is, instead of like, you know, trying to buy a bunch of Google AdWords or you know, these other things, is actually trying to advertise locally. And I have a weird thing that I've done for this, which is, you know, I wanted to have a self-sufficient demo station, which, you know, was like a self-sufficient demo station, because I didn't want to have just like a computer, right? Because a computer could be anything. It could be work, you know, it could be spreadsheets. It doesn't say that it's a game. And I, you know, thought about it for a little bit, and I was like, you know, arcades are self-sufficient demo stations. And you can buy kits, you know, that, you know, so I put together this little mini arcade kit, and it'll actually be showing up in Tilt, which is a fantastic barcade. They've got pinball, they've got great food, they've got all these classic arcade games. They're a sponsor of Comic-Con here, and you know, that's my way of trying to reach people locally, and it also, you know, gets you a spot where your game is physically present somewhere, instead of only just being this virtual entity with, you know, some advertising.
Okay. Well, I want to talk to you. If you're developing a game, you're going to want to think about distribution of your game, obviously. And, you know, are you developing a console game? Are you developing a PC game? I don't know if there's such thing as a Mac game. I guess there is. Yeah. Well, you can put it on the Mac Store, and which one of our games is on the Mac Store actually for Mac apps. Or you're doing a mobile game, and you know, it goes anywhere from, if you're looking at AAA titles, that kind of marketing and promotion is entirely different than you would do as an indie. But if you're after the mobile space, putting your game on Google Play or in the App Store under iOS really doesn't guarantee you anything. I mean, you know, the download trickle is very slow. People do things like hire companies to buy customers effectively, get people to download games. You've seen, I don't know if you've seen pictures of this, but you know, there's people in China with like, I don't know, 50 iPhones in front of them, and they're downloading games and they're giving them 5-star ratings. So you know, you're investing money, or you may be investing money into doing that, but it is a real challenge to identify, you know, who's that audience that's really going to resonate with the game you provided, and how are you going to use those people to move forward. Some people do Kickstarters not to fund the game, but to build a base of enthusiastic players and fans in the beginning with the hope that they're going to spread that word out. So if you look at, you raise $100,000 on Kickstarter, that sounds like a lot of money, and maybe if you're one person working, in your apartment, but if you're 3 or 4 people and you're trying to live and eat and pay mortgages, $100,000 is nothing. You go through that in no time. So you wouldn't use Kickstarter, but you could use social media and also crowdfunding to fund your game and really to get the word out there.
So I was going to speak to social media being a very, very, very powerful tool in marketing yourself and your game, but you've already done a good job of that. One thing that I do have to say is honesty will market your game better than anything else, better than money, better than any flashy posters or other shady designs. Just be honest with your game, what it is, and put that out in front of the people, and the people will either consume it or decide to walk on to the next piece of entertainment, because there's a lot out there.
So do any of you guys have any questions? I mean, even show of hands. All right, you're the first one I see.
Hi, so I have a comment and a question, if that's all right. So my comment is, I've noticed with gaming that not only character development is good, but also atmosphere, and the best game series I can think of that shows great atmosphere is the Fatal Frame series. Sometimes it gets so scary I have to turn the volume down because I know a jump scare is going to happen, I just don't know when. So that's what I think is good in video games. And my question is that when it comes to storytelling for video games or film or novels, should a student have to take classes that cost thousands of dollars, or should they just try and half wing in, half learn from others?
Well, with regards to storytelling and narrative, there's a lot of resources out there that you can lean against when you're just starting out and learning. A lot of free resources as well. Looking at Campbell's work with The Hero's Journey is probably your ground zero step. Like, just know what The Hero's Journey is and how you can fold that in and dissect a lot of titles that you particularly liked. You might not know why you like them, but sit down and do a good study of what really actually makes those work and work for you in general. Once you can figure out how it resonates and pull it apart and put those pieces into your own, bag of tools, then you can understand how to form your own stories and have it resonate with like-minded individuals.
I just wanted to, address one thing about story, and that is making the choice between a closed story, this is where the game's going and this is how it ends, or what really has emerged now is sort of the never-ending story. Because game developers, particularly savvy ones on the money side, really don't want the game to end. They don't want you to stop buying or paying for those microtransactions. So if you think of things like Clash of Clans, right? Go back a little bit further and think of like SimCity. It doesn't end. You keep playing, you keep playing. And so you're trying to create an immersive environment in order to engage the player, and atmosphere can do that, right? And story can make it more believable. But that might be a question you have to ask yourself too. Do you want this to be a closed story, where it's sort of a franchise where okay, Halo 2, Halo 3, Halo 4, or are you trying to create a game where they will just play forever?
Warcraft.
Yeah, I think as far as whether or not you need to spend, thousands upon hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to do it, you can get a really expensive education and not actually learn anything. You can also get a really cheap education and learn a lot. I think it's more a question of being able to do the research on your own before you invest the money, to say, what is it that I need? What is it that the people here can provide versus what the people here can provide, and which one's going to benefit me more? So I think you're better off making a time investment first and deciding, what areas you're really lacking in, where you need the experience boost from someone else, before you start trying to throw money at something. Because 9 times out of 10, when you decide like, oh, this one's more expensive, I will get this one, you're probably making the wrong decision. It may end up being the right decision, but you don't know yet. And you're definitely better off knowing ahead of time.
Anybody else have any questions? Right there.
So can you speak to the changes in the industry and like how that's kind of enabled you to start independent companies and you know, the teams? How did you assemble teams and hard were they?
Well, I can talk about one change in the industry, particularly in the mobile space. In the last 24 months, we call it the race to zero, which is the price of a game. So one of the things that's changed is that people are no longer willing to spend 99 cents on a game that they don't know. And, you know, 99 cents is not a lot of money, right? You need millions of people to pay you that kind of money to make the game work. So one thing that has changed is, you know, really the emergence of microtransactions, where you get into a game and you can play through the whole game, but it's not a great experience unless you buy this, you know, this power up or what have you. You know, you might be buying just game assets to make your game characters look better, but you may also be buying things that help facilitate your ability to play the game. I think for me that was one. It keeps changing, and we're designing our game. We're like, oh Christ, you know, what's happening next year? What's it going to look like? One area game changing.
Yeah, you're going to hear a lot of words thrown around like freemium and play to win and free to play, buy to play, where you buy the game but then don't have to pay a subscription. There's a lot of changing models in terms of getting your money back out of development costs. So we don't really have a definitive answer right now. It's kind of just malleable. It's amorphous. It is what it is. Pushing forward though, you just realize that you have a lot of new conduits to push your game out there. You've got Xbox programs, you've got programs with every major developer for console space, you've got Steam Greenlight, you've got other channels where you can actually just push your rough games out there as well. Rough designs, unfinished games that people can then play and start to build a fan base on your own work that way. So it really is kind of just about putting yourself out there and keep pushing your work forward, and eventually it's going to get picked up and build an audience.
One of the things that's kind of amazing is the tools that we have now are able to leverage, you know, your work and your effort to such a degree that, you know, you can now make the games that you played as a kid that took, you know, teams of people to put together, and those are totally within your reach now, and that's wonderful for you as a, you know, independent developer being able to create this game. But it also, because these tools have given you such leverage and lowered the, you know, barrier to entry, there's so many people that have grown up with games that want to make games that there's this, you know, flood of games that come out. You know, the Apple App Store receives 300 submissions for games per day. So if you're an independent developer and you're creating a game, you know, one game a year, one game every 2 years, that's a pretty good record, I think. But, you know, that one day when you release, you're in contention, you know, with 300 other people. 300 other games, actually, I should say. You know, one thing I guess I would, this is not a caution that I took myself, but I will tell it to you anyway, is don't quit your day job. You can do this on the side. Or you can have a very supportive spouse. But you know, you can do these projects, you know, on the side, and that's what I would encourage doing to try to build up that audience, because building the audience is really key.
And you'll also find too that development now can happen virtually. There's a lot of virtual teams. All of my freelance work is done virtually. I finished a contract recently on Adrift, which is a VR title in space, and all of our team was spread out throughout the globe. So it made working with people a little bit more interesting because of time differences. But aside from that, it was just like working in a studio, only I didn't get bugged every 9 minutes with my headphones on. interrupting my workflow.
So guys, we're going to have to wrap this up because we have the next guys coming in. But first off, I want to thank you guys all for coming out and being part of this panel. It's fantastic. If you have any questions, as we're like tearing down everything, you may come up and maybe, you know, talk to these guys. Obviously, he's got a booth here at the con as well you can come check out. But yeah, we got to get the next guys in. So just want to thank you guys for coming out. And yeah, like I say, if you want to come by for a second and say hi to these guys as we're all wrapping up. Thank you guys so much for coming out. And hopefully you stick around for the next panel, which is the 501st. Thank you guys so much as well.